Good morning. I wanted to put up a short video to show people how I fixed the play in my rudder on my 343 Beneteau sailboat. My wife and I have owned it for a little over a year, and at the time of purchase the surveyor pointed out to me that there was play in the rudder and had suggested maybe using some Silpat to fix the problem. I really didn't understand what he meant at the time. We had a great season last year using the boat, and now that she's up on the hard this winter here in Maryland, I thought I would attend to some of these fix-it projects. So the first thing I had to do was figure out how to loosen the rudder post from the quadrant, and I'll take you inside the boat and show you what I did. So to gain access to the rudder post, I was able to remove the wooden window box from the rear part of the boat, and then that gives you that accessibility right there. It's still very tight, but once you're in here, you can work on removing, or as it was, loosening these. I took these two bolts out to let this back collar move back enough to clear the upper pin, which is in there, and then this lower pin can be removed as well. Right now I just have it holding the rudder up. When it's properly placed, it's going to be above this chrome collar here. But that's how you get the rudder post, loosened and lower it down. And I'll take you outside the boat and show you that part. So here's the rudder lowered, and you can see that it's resting on the ground. It doesn't need to be lowered really any more than that. This copper bushing goes up in the hull, the hole in the hull of the boat. And there's a space that's been created up in there through wear that is bigger than it should be, and that's what lets this lower part of the rudder wobble. So there was a great video online where a fella had outlined, clamping this down tight on the rudder post with a pipe clamp, and then putting PVA on here as a releasing agent, and then building up a fiberglass collar around this, and then sanding it and putting it back up in the hole in the hull. And I even went so far as to do that. I did build this fiberglass collar around there. The problem I was running into, though, was I couldn't get it to go back up in the hull of the boat. I think this opening diameter is actually narrower than the diameter of the worn area up inside the hull. So I had to sand and sand and sand, and the more I sanded, the fiberglass collar was getting weaker and thinner, and I realized that by the time I got it thin enough to get it through this opening diameter, it wasn't going to be thick enough once it's up inside the boat. So the idea of the Silpat came back to me from our surveyor, and my wife had that in our kitchen, and she let me steal it from her. But so this is the material. It's kind of a Teflon with fiber in it, and you bake cookies on it, I think, in the kitchen and so forth. But I cut a strip here, and actually ironically made in France for our Beneteau sailboat, but this strip rather perfectly fits around here. We put this up in there, and then you can compress the copper bearing and put it up in the hole as it's compressed, and then let it expand once it's in the hole, and it makes a really snug fit. It keeps this compressed at just the right tightness around the rudder post, so when you put the rudder post back up in there, it's just amazing. There's just no play in the rudder at all, and it's a rather straightforward fix. I don't even think I'm going to need epoxy, which has been a challenge here in Maryland with the 40-degree weather, to get the epoxy to cure. And I don't think it will go anywhere. There's an upper lip ledge that won't let it go north in the rudder tube, and it really can't escape out the bottom because this washer will be in place when the rudder's fully up. So this is just a great fix, and I hope that it works. We're going to put it together and see how it goes. So I have put the Silpat up in there, and I did think better to maybe just put a thin film of adhesive on the Silpat to hold it in place, because on further thought I think that it may actually shift some and I want it to be sure that it doesn't travel or migrate out of the space where it's supposed to stay. So a thin film of adhesive was applied. So one of the problems of when you remove the bolts completely on that quadrant, you have these free nuts which are hard to get back in there. It's such a tight space to work, but there is a little nut tray here. I'll have to tape those nuts in the tray, and then you can kind of try to squeeze that tray up in there, and hopefully you get close where you can get these threaded back in. But putting that quadrant back together is going to be a little bit of a challenge, but I think it will go okay. This is the pin that goes in the upper part of the rudder post, and I'll replace this cotter pin, which is on the lower pin. So I got the rudder post back up in there and bolted into the quadrant, and it wasn't quite as hard as I thought it would be, but it's nice and tight there, and you can see that the rudder just has no play at all, really. So that seems to be a good fix there. So stay warm this winter, and happy sailing in the spring.